Nice to see you. Can we see you?
And I did hear from Ryan that he is.
He can't.
Yeah, so he can't come. So.
Yeah, he usually comes. So, and usually Alex does, but maybe she'll join us.
Yeah, I just pinged her, so hopefully we should get it. But I'm recording, so you can start whenever you like, Nancy. But actually, I was going to start by making a couple of quick announcements.
Sure.
Alex has just joined us. Hi, Alex.
Great. Hi, Alex.
So the announcements are that almost everybody is a MasterCard Scholar, and if you are a MasterCard Scholar, we're going to be sending you a special evaluation form that MasterCard requires as part of your participation in the program. We'll be sending everybody the post-assessment. You filled out a pre-assessment when you started the program, and we will want you to fill out a post-assessment, and both of these should be completed as soon as you're done with all of your work. We would like to get both the post-assessment and the MasterCard Scholars evaluation back ideally by the end of the first week in June, which is kind of pushing it, I know, but that would be like June 8th. So, and I'll be nudging you. And just so you know what you're going to get, I'm going to show this really cool certificate, which I will mail to you. And with any kind of luck, it'll actually arrive there. Some of them actually did arrive, and some of them didn't arrive, but it'll have your name on it, and Nancy and I will sign it, and it'll be officially ready for you to hang on your wall next to your other diplomas and important documents. So, but the deal I always work out with folks is if I get both evaluation forms, I'll send you your certificate. If I don't get those, I'm going to hold it hostage. So.
And the other thing, if I might add, Bill, we hold hostages. Many of you come back to us for references, if you're going on to further education related to, because, you're doing some research here. So if you have successfully completed, we are happy to do that. But we do obviously expect that you've completed the course.
Right.
So I guess I will begin. We're in our last and final module, sadly, but we would like to have a webinar just to have a graduation ceremony. So once you finished your research, we'll set that up. But in terms of the content, this is our last module. So again, I'm really going to encourage you to, I know it's you're busy with your own work and your own lives, but I do encourage you to make sure that you participate in this last module. What we're going to focus on is monitoring outcomes and field work. So this is the final straw. You finished, or the final step. You finished your methodology, and now you should be heading into the field. I want to just take a moment and, we always have our guest facilitator, Bill, and I also want to introduce Hugh Allen. He joined us last time, but very happy to have him, especially for this module where we're talking about monitoring. And Hugh, do you want to just say a quick hello?
Yeah, sure. Hold on. Yeah, yes, yes, here I am. Hello.
Our famous guest star. Most of you know Hugh as one of the real pioneers in our work in savings group, and so it's a pleasure to have you, Hugh. And do feel free to cut in at any point if you want to.
Okay.
Ask a question, provide a comment.
Okay, I shall bring my grumpy old man hat with me, okay?
And I do have the power to mute you. I'm kidding. I don't.
I do. I just
Bill
did.
does.
He's muted. He can sit there and scream all he wants, but.
So, and of course, Hugh is the founder and is the man, the genius behind Savix, which is our savings group's global standard for performance comparison. So when we talk a little bit about the ratios later, many of you will be already using some of the savings data. So I'll try to actually keep my content to a minimum so we can even do some Q&A with you, Hugh, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, let's get right in. So what we want to talk about is monitoring groups and monitoring what matters. Because we can collect reams of data. What you find sometimes in programs is there's a lot of data being collected. There's not a lot of data being used. And so let's work back from, we've been having this discussion online in the discussion forum. Not everyone has been participating. So in your own words, and we don't want a long academic answer, but in your own words, in your program, what's a quality group? How do you know a strong group in your program? In your own few words, what's a strong or a quality group? Let's hear from you. James, Jeffrey.
Yes.
Go ahead. What's a quality or a strong group for you?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. A strong group would be a group that have very good governance system.
And can you tell us a little bit more about, not everyone might know exactly what you mean when you say governance.
Yes.
What do you mean by good governance system?
A good governance, yeah, I'm saying they should have a constitution that is a functional constitution and well followed. The group should have a way of changing their leadership without anybody clinging into power.
So no dominating leaders?
Not dominating leadership. The group should be meeting regularly as per their constitution. The group should be appraising different loans that are taken by each member, so that they could check the quality of investment in the loan. What are they using the loan for? So they need to have a way of appraising the loan. A good group should have a very good meeting attendance.
Great.
The meeting attendance, we should be having close to 98 to 100% people attending meeting.
You're a toughie.
Wow. Even in rainy season, even in harvest time?
Then when you are not attending meeting, there should be need for you giving us a reason why you're absent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should at least understand. There should be a clear. So yes. Great. So these are some great examples that you're linking to a good governance, a well-governed group.
Yes. Yes.
Anyone else? What makes a quality or strong group in your program, in your context? How do we know a strong group when we see one?
To me, maybe in addition to what Jeffrey is talking about.
Yes, James?
We'll have good records of the group.
And what do you mean by, again, good records?
Records, I mean, maybe cross-checking the counter book or maybe having the saving books that you can be able even to see the records from both sides. They can be able to tally and they are harmonized.
So you've cross-checked them, you've done kind of a spot checking to make sure that they're correct, that they're...
Yeah, you'll be able to see that is a good group, at least they are performing well.
Hello?
And
Hello?
even a group where they can be able...
Yes, go ahead, Jane. Yes, and then we'll hear from Diane. Go ahead.
Yeah, a group which can be able even to conduct monitoring without even your presence, without you being there. They're able to do some auditing of their books.
Great. So it's not just the quality of the records themselves, but it's their ability to do their bookkeeping on their own is for you a mark of a quality group. And again, you're doing this in your research, but we usually have a spectrum of groups. So we're talking about the kind of gold star ideal. Diane, did you have something to add?
Hi. Also, I think
Oh, Alex, sorry.
a good group is also autonomous. So doesn't necessarily, when it's established, it doesn't need a facilitator to start the meetings or to organize, but it could exist and carry on by itself. Usually has a structure of roles. There's a president figure, treasurer, or and a secretary that help balance the group organization.
Mm-hmm. Structured roles or leadership, so back to good governance. And you're talking about autonomous. And now all groups, you would say that if we're looking at what is a strong or a quality group, they have to be completely autonomous, so none of them have community-based agents or field agents at any point?
No, I think for recent groups, it is expected for them to have some type of field agent, a prestatory worker to come in to help organize. But once a group is established and has 2 or 3 more years, usually those are some of the qualities that the group is autonomous, is no longer reliant on the agent to come in. But I think for the most part, what I've observed is that newly fresh groups, they are still dependent on that field agent, that PSP, that worker to come in and help organize and gather everyone together. But I think a quality for groups that are going without this help is that they're autonomous and they don't need that help from that agent worker.
Great, yes. And it's an important distinction, isn't it? Because when we talk about quality of groups, there is a big difference depending on the maturity of the groups. So you're talking about, again, the kind of end game. You're working toward groups that are autonomous, that aren't reliant on the agent. But in the initial stages, absolutely, they are trained, they are supervised by agents.
Exactly.
Helpful.
Nancy, if I can just say something there, Nancy.
Yes.
Most methodologies, and I can speak for VSL methodology, which I've worked with for quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The start of the manual is very clear that we're starting off groups and we are taking them through phases.
Yes.
You know, we talk about the starter phase, the development phase, and the maturity phase. So as the group is progressing through those phases, right at the start, you know where you're taking them. So your goal is for them to be self-managing, 9 months or 12 months into their phase. So if you're monitoring, then you know this group just started, so I don't expect them to be on their own, to run things on their own. But if a group is 9 months, 8, 10 months, 12 months, almost into their graduation, then your standards are, your expectations are a bit higher.
Absolutely.
So, right.
Absolutely. And Andrew just gave a very good example of, we've been talking online in the discussions and in your work that you're doing in the field about segmentation or clustering of the groups in our overall program or portfolio, and why we do that. So this is a good example. When we look at groups that are at startup phase versus development versus maturity, we're going to look at different things in terms of how well they're doing. We're going to look at the same indicators, but we're going to have slightly different expectations. So we want to have, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to clarify something there. So for example, during the startup, or what we call the intensive phase, you monitor the field officer, whoever, or the village agent, whoever is monitoring the group, supervising the group, will visit them a bit more often. And then during the development stage, they start sort of letting missing meetings and letting them run on their own. And then during the maturity phase, the field officer has very few times when they visit. So again, the group has an opportunity to learn how to manage on themselves, but on their own. So there's the sense in which you're taking them through a phase. So come this phase, they won't expect the field officer there or the village agent.
Yeah. In some cases, in the maturity phase, it's really only to support the share out, and in some cases, they're able to share out completely on their own. James.
Yeah, I was talking maybe some addition when you're talking about the leadership. When we have a mixed group where we have both genders, male and female in one group, and considering leadership, balancing of that leadership to create even trust for both gender would be a good group also.
So in some cases, depending on the program, you may be looking for a gender balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some cases, I mean, even in your research, some of you have all female groups, or in some cases, all male groups. Really going to depend on the program there.
Yes.
But good that, I mean, a lot of what we've been doing is also paying attention to the gendered element, gender analysis in the work that we're doing. Yeah, what does it mean? What does it mean?
Gender balance?
Oh, no, sorry, that not asking a question, but just that we're constantly asking these questions around gender. Yeah, what does it mean to have an all-female group, or what does it mean when there's a mix? What are the implications? So helpful to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
In some groups, you find that the project itself says that we expect in a mixed group for there to be at least 2 women in the management committee of 5. So it's already set, the standard is already set. So when you go to a group, you can tell whether the group has managed to have 2 women out of the 5. So it's easy to monitor, it's easy to check.
Can I add something?
Absolutely, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah, dropouts or retention is very key in determining the quality of the groups. If you see a group that are consistently not dropping out from, you would see that these groups are very cohesive and they are heading towards the kind of development they would need. Yeah,
absolutely. It's an indication of loyalty and commitment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think attendance is a very powerful indicator. That's probably the most, in my view, is one of the most important indicators of commitment and value that people feel they get from the group is the fact that they take the trouble to show up. I think very often early in a program, you'll find that there's quite a high dropout rate because it's a new program. People don't really know what it's all about, so some people naturally drop out. As time goes on, that stabilizes and settles down. And what, for me, is the more important indicator is attendance. One other thing that I sort of feel needs mentioning when you're monitoring, I mean, you're talking about governance, you're talking about record keeping, and you're talking about the phases through which a group passes. But I think what's missing from this is procedures. The thing that makes this work is the fact that, all right, you have a leadership system, you have a whole set of financial tools to track savings and credit and insurance, but conducting a meeting in an orderly and structured and consistent way is very important because in the absence of a written policies and procedures book, how things are done habitually, how people develop habits around how meetings are conducted is an indicator for me that and I think from a program perspective, if you find one group does things very differently from another, that would raise questions. But if you go across a program and you find that all groups are following a standardized set of procedures, then it means that the program is taking its responsibility seriously to monitor its field stuff.
Great. Thanks, Hugh. So just adding, yeah.
Yeah, just thinking about something where a good group will be able to think outside the box, thinking outside the savings they're doing, and as the group grows, the group is able to even do more investment outside the saving group model, establish even business network, establish partnership with other stakeholders within the community, a group that is able to think outside what they are doing now. Yeah.
For us, a healthy group Yeah, some of these have been mentioned, but for us, we check the group structure, the meeting structure.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows us if they are following the methodology or not. We have what we call the 5 W's, the welcome, worship, word, work, wrap up. So that shows if it's time for training, they get the training. If it's time for saving, they save. So when you visit that group, you check their meeting structure if they are following that structure.
Can you say the W's again? I missed capturing them.
The
welcome,
worship, word, worship.
Oh, worship.
Yeah. Word. Work and wrap up.
Okay.
So that shows us that the group is following the methodology, because the content of those 5 W's shows that they go through all that has to happen in that meeting.
And
another
sorry, just a question. The word is the bylaws. What does the word represent?
The word, because we partner with churches
Okay.
here, so they get time to share the word of God and pray.
Oh, okay. So this is part of worship, really.
Yeah.
And the work is all the savings group work. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
And another aspect is the share out. A healthy group is able to share out without conflict. So it's a good indicator of a healthy group.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we often forget that, but it's one of the more complex procedures in a group. And so their ability to do that, even when we're looking at the mature groups, their ability to do that with relatively little support is an important thing to be able to look at. So thank you for adding that. Okay, I'm going to keep going, but thank you for the rich range of things that we look at in terms of what matters in a group. So what is a quality group? So we talked about attendance rate as being, Hugh mentioned being extremely important, and I think Jeffrey or James mentioned it early on. We want to round out our understanding of their attendance with other elements of a group as well. So we look at things like savings amount, we look at growth of savings, we look at the sustainability of groups. So how well they're performing, are they growing? Are they self-managed after the program leaves? Are they well-governed? Many of you mentioned this element of well-governed. So I'm just going to switch a little bit to some of your field work. Why I keep mentioning clustering and segmenting of groups. I mean, we want to really have an understanding of, some of you are looking at issues of governance, you're looking at financial performance, repayment, you're looking at why they are or aren't doing well. For example, Alex is looking at an agricultural payment program that they have added on. And so we segment or cluster the groups so that we can really zero in and look at, why is this cluster of groups strong, where this cluster of groups is weak or moderate? And then we can dig down and look at some of the governance elements that you talked about are not easy to look at a program level. You know, we can't look at thousands of groups and understand the nuances of the governance always. But we can take indicators. We can have spot indicators that give us a sense. And then if we segment the program, we can dig down and do a deeper dive and better understand what's happening. We can do that by livelihood types. We could do that by gender. So some of you are, what is a representative sample of groups? Some of you are doing a statistically significant sample of groups. So you're wanting a representative sample. You're wanting a group that mirrors the overall program in your sample. So it's the same mix of livelihood activities, of group maturity. And you decide what that criteria is. I wanted to just clarify this because there's been a lot of questions about sampling. And purpose of sampling Purpose of sampling is when we choose to sample, it's not representative of the portfolio, but it helps us to explore some issues. So we're specifically looking at particular segments of the portfolio in order to answer questions. So just to contrast those two, you may look at a representative sample. Alex, could I take your research as an example? She's looking at why groups are or aren't able to complete the agricultural payments, the participation in this agricultural program. There's two ways to do that. You could either take a representative sample and then look at, if we look at this kind of representative sample of the overall program, then what is good, bad, and ugly in terms of their ability to make these agricultural payments. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is actually just to zero in on those that are participating well in the agricultural program and those that are not, and in larger numbers really examine them. That would be a purposive sample. I hope that's helping a little bit clearer. Any questions about sampling? I don't want to spend too much time because we can continue to do Q&A but I just online. But this next assignment, just a reminder that you're going to include those previous assignments. So you're going to have the gendered contextual analysis, your program background, why we want to help us understand why this question at this time, then your strategic research question, your sub questions, the scope, and then your second assignment, which is the whole methodology, your sub questions, matching the methods to those questions, the sources of data. And for those of you who are, I've already given lots of comments, and some of you have given peer coaching comments as well. You want to make sure you're doing something called triangulation. That is, you're not only relying on one source of data or on one method, but you're checking across different. So you're not just asking group members, but you're also asking trainers and maybe looking at some of the program data, database data. So this final assignment, the only thing you're doing is results, your preliminary findings, because this is just pilot testing, and then your conclusions. So the results, what's the difference between results and findings? Your results is just very objectively answering the questions that you laid out, your sub-questions. The preliminary findings is asking the question, so what? What do we see across these results? What's important here? What's the story that's emerging? And the conclusions usually point to the so what, the implications for the program. So does this mean that we want to think differently about anything or consider something in our program? Keeping in mind that we're only doing pilot testing at this point, so you're really talking about the one tool that you're looking at, either a focus group interview or some other rating tool perhaps. Just some advice on your pilot tools. I've had a look at many of them now. Keep it simple. You don't want a very long tool that's going to take hours for the members or the trainers to answer. Keep it simple and use a few good indicators to address your sub-questions well. If you ask too many, you risk getting lots of information and not very good data. Have a good sample and be very clear on why that sample. How does that sample relate to your questions? And be strategic about where you're pilot testing. And again, be clear about, in that overall program, why are you selecting this as a sample to look a little closer? Okay. So again, conducting the field work, you're going to analyze the results, answer the sub-questions, look for the story. I think I've already said all of this. Okay. So why do we monitor at the program level? First, we want to see how the groups are doing, again, relative to each other. And, back to SAVEX or back to other programs in the country, we want to also see how we're doing relative to similar programs. That really helps us to get a sense. And ultimately, we are working to group self-management or group self-reliance, so the ability for groups to manage on their own. You also want to help groups to be able, you want to be able to support groups in making informed choices. So related to linkages, these could be social linkages related to local programs, add-ons that they may be piggybacking with the groups, or it could be financial or market linkages. In any case, you want to be able to support the groups to make informed decisions. And you also want to get some early warning signs if there might be potential difficulties to support the groups. What about social monitoring? What are some of the things we look at? You've already talked about good governance. What are some of the other things that we look? It's too bad Ryan's not here because his whole research is on the total well-being of groups and members. So he's trying to look at how do we round out our understanding of what well-being is. And so let's just hear a couple of thoughts about what else can we look at in terms of social elements of the groups. We're going to look at both the social and the financial. And we won't repeat the good governance that we've already talked about. What are some other things beyond the governance elements? What might we look at for social? Maybe you don't look at social elements, social indicators, or social performance. But what might you look at? We know that these groups come together and stay together, not only for the savings, the social fund and the loans, but also because of really important social elements that they get from it. What are some of the things we might be able to look at? Diane, did you?
Can I say something?
Oh, James, go ahead.
Yes?
Yes, go ahead, please.
In that context, I define social aspect as group within that society. With the help of them being in a group, the saving group initiative increases their level of connectedness, increases their level of socializing or relating to one another, increases their level of sharing many of their personal needs, increases the level of linkage to different farmer groups, different programs, and most importantly, the aspect of the, relating at a certain point where you come up together as a family and support somebody who might be of above age, which in our case we call them like fostering. There's some parent, the home-based care. I'm talking about the home-based care, where groups come together and say, please, this is an elder among us. We can support this elder by providing some of the social amenities that the person might not be able to. We would also look at the aspect of saving group arrangement or initiative to be the one very key in reducing internal conflict. Taking it reduces internal conflicts that might emerge between that very society or that community. I would want to re-echo the fact that also within Ugandan setting, the issue of land conflict is so high, but the groups that are in a saving arrangement, they are always very peaceful, they are coexisting, there is high level of reduction of the internal conflict on land wrangles and all that. So I see the social aspect is more key in shaping the development destiny more than having the money, because it repairs people's mind, shapes people to be in the right shape to carry on with their development. And I want to conclude by saying it reduces gender-based violence. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the range of examples there, Jeffrey. Also, his research is very interesting, looking at some of these other elements and what the savings groups are able to impact. But you've given some really important examples of things that we might look at that go beyond the economic. Social capital, the lowering of conflict related to land, orphan care or care for others in the community, and reduction of gender-based violence. Can I ask that everybody mute your mic if you're not speaking so we don't have the back? So if everyone, please mute your mic. Yeah, there we go. So some of the things that, and you know, some of these things again are difficult to get to on a regular monitoring basis. But in our monitoring, we always want to distinguish between the types of indicators, the type of monitoring that we can do on a regular basis, monthly or quarterly at the program level, and what we might need to do in a deeper dive. So some of these things that, like you're doing with your action research, we're doing a deeper dive to investigate some of this more nuanced information. So some of the things we might look at is some of the social services or elements. For example, we can dig down and look at what they do with the social fund and how they use the social fund, all the dynamics around the social fund. We can look at the ability for the group to meet its own goals. So we can ask the group, what's important to you and how are you able to reach those goals? And we can use different tools like appreciative inquiry or most significant change. Again, Ryan's work is looking at what is happiness or well-being for the group, what is empowerment. Many times we look at things related to the depth of outreach, so our ability to reach marginalized populations. I'm just looking at some of the notes here. Oops, sorry. We look at social capital or cohesion, as Jeffrey talked about. We can look at use of funds. This is a bit more economic, but we can look at how they're using funds in terms of its impact on the household or the community. We can look at things like consumption smoothing, investment, savings, short and long-term, emergencies, and against other alternatives. So how they're using the savings groups against other alternatives, sources of funds. And we've already talked about the importance of governance. So we already talked about what makes a strong program in your group. This is just an example of a tool because you're all using adapted tools. This is an example of a group self-reliance tool that Sewa Bank uses in India for their groups to be self-reliant, and that's their goal. So they break it down into 4 different sections. Is the group growing? Is the group managed well financially? Is the group managing its risk well? So all of the, you know, those 2 centerpieces really important around governance, bookkeeping, bylaws, whether they're assessing their finances regularly, if the profit is reported and distributed. And then the last piece is the group well governed and working towards self-reliance. So this has to do with decision-making, regular capacity building of members, how they're carrying out the meetings, and the point that some of you mentioned around, are they making linkages in their community? Do they have that capacity? So for some of you looking at, for example, linkages to value chains, do they have that negotiating ability within the group to make those linkages? And they also look at the increased capacity of the group to understand their options and make decisions.
Hey, Nancy, could you just
yeah,
make your screen big, go down and
oh, sorry, yes, I've got it on.
It's a very small print, and let's see more if you can go down and.
It's completely gone off. Can you see?
Yes, that's better.
Sorry about that. I reduce it so I can write, and then you can't see it very well. So you'll have a copy of these slides, but this is just an example of a rating tool. And many of you, again, in your fieldwork, are using some form of tool, and some of you are using rating tools. They can be handy again. It's like a spot check that then we have a sense of how the group and the groups are doing at a program level, and we can dig down and do a deeper dive and find out more. Okay, now I want to focus a little bit on the financial or the economic side. And I think we're running a little bit out of time, so I want to do this fairly quickly. I just want to ask you, how does a tomato vendor make money? What are the different ways? Just think of the tomato vendor in your informal markets. How do they make money? How are they making profit? How are they earning income? How are they growing their tomato business? What are some things that they have to do? Just a few quick answers. Big smile at Jeffrey.
Yes, I am a farmer, so I'm very delighted to see this example.
You're a tomato farmer?
Yes, I grow tomatoes. So the most important thing is to look at the economies of sale of tomatoes. That is by looking at the fact that you need to have improved varieties of the tomato seed. You need to apply the right agronomic practices.
Yes.
You need to ensure you apply some fertilizers to increase the yield. And then you need to plant early.
Yeah.
And then you need to do the regular harvesting, spraying, so that you can get the best yield out of that. And then as a farmer of tomato, you need to ensure that you have the market available. And that implies if the market is far off from your place, you need to have a transport system that can really keep these tomatoes, because it is a perishable good.
Yes, exactly.
So you need to have that kind of fact. And then also the tomato farmer need to do a cost-benefit analysis with other investment that they have around. So that when you start the business, yes, please.
Well, now every small informal tomato vendor isn't going to do a full-fledged. You're probably a bit more sophisticated than a lot of the vendors selling tomatoes. But absolutely, you're wanting to grow your yield. You're wanting to sell more tomatoes, and how can you do that? And you're wanting to reduce the spoilage. And so, what are other ways? Again, can folks mute your mic if you're not speaking, so we don't hear the back noise? So, what are other ways that you're actually getting profit? How are you making income? You're selling more tomatoes. You're reducing the spoilage, so you're reducing losses. You mentioned a couple of things, and all the other things like varieties, planting early, those are things so that you can sell more, right? So what are all the ways, whether it's tomatoes or whatever product we're selling, how do we make income? So Jeffrey mentioned a few things. Anything else? Sell a high, yeah, James?
I'll mention maybe one thing about starting with the market. Where if you want to plant tomatoes now, then we want to know during the period of harvest, is that the time the market is good for me to sell tomatoes? And then you have to link with the buyers then to know they are buyers for tomatoes. So that will enable even that you'll be able to get the high value for that money and be able even to sell the whole volume of tomatoes you have.
Absolutely. So you want to connect with the buyers. You want to sell a higher volume. You're trying to find when to plant, when to sell, to maximize the volume, right? Sell as many tomatoes. You said you want to link to the buyers. Yeah. You want to maximize the number of buyers that you have. You want to expand who you're selling to.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the price. Yes, you want to maximize how much you can get for those tomatoes.
Also, hello?
Yes, go ahead. Oh, hi, Beverly.
Hi.
You joined us. Welcome. Also?
Thank you. So I also wanted to say that you can do complementary products.
Yes.
Which complementary goods that go well with tomatoes, so that you can have different options for vendors, for customers who come to your stall. Then also really displaying it well for the customers to see can help you increase your selling and maximize your profits.
Absolutely. So so diversifying your products can help with cross-selling. Someone comes for soap and they buy tomatoes. They come for tomatoes, they buy soap. And again, making the product look,
sorry,
onions.
just go ahead.
No, I'm just paraphrasing. You also said making it look more attractive, the way you're piling it, the way you're presenting it, so that you increase your sales.
Sure.
Yes. So let me just very quickly, if you can remember these basics around a tomato vendor, you have the basic principles of the financial principles that you need to know, whether it's a group, whether it's the overall program, whether it's a full-fledged cooperative. So we want to ensure good tomatoes so there's not spoilage. So we want to reduce risk there. If we want to buy as low as possible and sell as high as possible, right? We want to maximize the price that we can get. We want to attract more clients or buyers. We want to sell a higher volume of tomatoes, and we want to reduce expenses if we can reduce our transportation costs, our buying costs. All of that can help increase our income. If we can remember these elements, the same is true for a group, right? So when we're thinking about financial monitoring at a program level, so the breadth of this, so we're getting back to some of the aspects of outreach that we've already looked at. The breadth of outreach, so selling more tomatoes to more people. We're thinking the same about dramatically increasing scale in our programs. How do we have both more members, more groups, more geographical expansion without compromising the quality? Right? Whenever we're talking about financial performance, it's always ensuring that we're not compromising the quality of the groups. In terms of sustainability, where does the group itself get its returns for members? So if we think about the returns that members get, where do they get those returns? It has to do with the interest that they're charging themselves, right? So for a group, they're not selling tomatoes, they're actually kind of selling loans. So what they offer to their members in terms of loans, it's their own income. It's not going outside, but they're offering loans and they're selling it with that interest. And that interest becomes income for the group. Is that clear? The link with the tomato vendor? So the efficiency is, how do they reduce the cost of tomatoes? And in the group, groups are already very efficient, so that's not usually a big issue, but how are they reducing costs, making it as efficient as possible? Really, their expenses are so little in terms of cash box and books. But productivity or caseloads is something that we look at the program level that's very important. Both the field agent caseloads, the PSP or the village agent or the community-based agent caseloads. So that's, how do we get more tomatoes out through our channels? You know, maybe we're selling it mobile, maybe we're selling it out of our home, maybe we're selling it at the market certain days of week. And how much can we get out? The same is true for a program. You're looking at how much can an agent, field agent, village agent, what is their caseload? And again, what is the caseload that they can do without compromising quality? And that's going to vary. It's going to vary by many factors, as we looked at in our outreach module. And finally, the risk management. How do we prevent spoilage? So how do we tomatoes are fragile. How do we prevent fraud or the lack of repayment, default, or any other kind of mismanagement? One of you mentioned dominating leaders. How do you prevent those kinds of risks? So how do you make sure that the governance oversees that? Is that clear, those principles? Because those principles, they operate, again, at a group level, and they operate at an organizational level. If you understand these financial principles, you understand the financial principles for any financial organization, from an ASCA or ROSCA, an informal, right up to a bank. These are the same. We obviously look at different things, but the financial principles are the same. Questions of clarification? Okay, so I asked you to do an exercise that you did online, and you had 3 examples here. You had unlinked groups that cash out. You had linked groups that were linked to a formal financial institution that also cash out. And then you have linked groups that were accumulating their funds. In other words, they weren't sharing out, they were rolling it back in. So what's important for you to realize, we're not concerned that you or the groups necessarily worry about these financial ratios. What I want you to understand is the logic behind them. That the decisions that groups are making have implications. They have implications financially for the returns that members are going to get back at the end of share out. And they have implications in terms of the group to be able to manage, to be able to self-manage. So linkages with external financial institutions don't just have risks, they also have costs. And we can actually see those costs in this exercise. So how many of you were able to do the exercise, honestly? Not many, eh? We had a few. So I'm going to put the answer sheet up. Maybe I'll give you to the end of this week. But I mean, Jeffrey did it, Andrew. Maybe we can just take you through a little bit. I'm not going to take too much time since you haven't done it. But these are some of the indicators that we're looking at and comparing, and maybe any observations that you have related to this information, comparing these 3 different groups. When you look at this information, what comes to mind? What stands out for you? We have the average age of groups. We have the average number of members of groups. We have field staff. We have the number of active members trained by field staff or their trained agents. We have the percentage of savings groups with members with outstanding loans. We have the average outstanding loan portfolio, overall in US dollars. And then we have the productivity or the caseloads. So any observations? The first, just to clarify those first 2 numbers and the unlinked groups, the first number relates to the field staff productivity. So that's the field staff's ability to, the number of members that field staff was able to reach, not just their own caseload, but those they have trained. Yes, and then the second one relates to the average across those who have been trained. So looking at the first numbers, let's leave the second one aside. So the caseload for unlinked cash out savings groups, linked cash out savings groups, and linked accumulating. So we have 380, 180, and 80. Jeffrey.
I think, sorry, I'm dominating, but I just want to
no problem.
give my case out clearly. But before I contribute on productivity, I would want to look at the percentage saving group members with outstanding loan, looking at across the different saving group component, that is the hand link, cash out, and then the link, cash out, and then the link. They are averagely healthy. Members are taking loan. That is one thing I'm seeing from this analysis, because you could see almost 88% of the people in the first lot, they are taking loan. In the middle one, they are 76. The link accumulating saving group, there are 89% of people taking loan, and that is very good. However, when you look at the average saving group out loan portfolio per each member, the link accumulating saving group seems to have a fairly higher average saving group loan portfolio. And this relates to the fact that these group that are linked and they're accumulating their saving have they have a fairly bigger loan portfolio for each member to borrow. So
because they have an external loan as well.
And they also have external loan as well. Now that means this group can easily invest at a fairly high rate because they have, and they can have access to fairly good share of capital for investment compared to the other two. Yeah, so I think that is something that we need to promote, to see these people, these groups are linked out, and then also they have access to other external credits.
But what do we have to weigh that with? They have access to more capital, but what do we have to ensure? There's also risks involved, aren't there?
Yes,
in external.
There's a great risk involved in the fact that if you link it to another financial institution, the high chances that the saving principle might not be followed by the group. The other commercial bank or commercial institution or financial institution will come with their different demands, trying to change the saving principle, and that really might not so well go with saving group.
That's right. So there are risks both to governance and the costs involved in the external linkages.
It looks, when I look at this, it looks as if, I mean, the productivity, the caseload productivity is significantly lower in the linked accumulating SG's model. And that kind of implies the permanent presence of a facilitating agent who is somehow or another managing or helping them in that external relationship. And the other thing that's not shown here is loan repayment rates. Are there difficulties in terms of loan repayments? Because the hot money, cold money issue comes up. You know, what's ours we care about, what's external we may in fact be less strict.
Yes, absolutely. Let me just go to that slide. So Hugh's talking about hot and cold money. How many of you are familiar with this concept? So this is a really important principle at the base of our work in savings groups, and that is we know from both literature, studies, and experience around the world that hot money, members' own capital, their own equity, their own contributions, they are going to govern better. They take more seriously. It's not surprising because we think about our own money. If it's our money, we're going to safeguard it. We're going to watch it. We're going to keep an eye on you because it's that's my hard-earned money. Whereas if I have a loan from the bank, that's what we call, and even donations, that's called cold money. And we don't actually safeguard that as well. So we don't pay it back as well. We don't take it as seriously. That includes donations. That includes external debt from linkages. So all of this is important when we're supporting savings groups in linkages. So we know that the ratio of hot to cold money matters. So we've seen this very drastic examples in India, where if they're over leveraged, if they're borrowing too much cold money relative to their own hot money, it can really lead to problems. I mean, we saw that in the financial crisis worldwide. This isn't just a savings group phenomena, right?
Paul Rippey did a very interesting study in Niger, where he looked at groups that were saving their own money, and then he looked at groups that had borrowed, and he classified that into 3 different levels. One was borrowed money externally had a good experience, borrowed money externally had a so-so experience, and borrowed money externally and had a bad experience. And he correlated that with dropout rates. And naturally enough, when a group borrowed money externally and had a bad experience, there was very high dropout. It averaged about 8.5 members per group. But the really interesting thing was that there was even significant dropout when the groups had a good experience, because most of the members were reticent to put their own personal money at risk to secure a loan from an external institution when the money coming into the group would tend to go to the better off person. So it's a complicated issue. So I think the last point is really, really critical. The timing of when cold money comes in matters. Some time to build group processes and governance. And I'm actually having a discussion right now with a program in Burkina Faso that wants to link groups to banks after their first cycle and allow them to borrow up to twice the amount of their share out at the beginning of the second cycle. And so here we're having this debate about, wait a minute, you know, you need to build experience, you need to proceed incrementally, you need to avoid the pitfalls. So that's an issue that I think we all need to be aware of. So the people who are very concerned about bank linkage and who believe in it need first of all to ask the question, is there a demand within the group for external funds? Does it bring significant advantages in terms of the length of loan term, for example, that might be more suitable, could be longer, but nevertheless proceed with a great deal of caution on this. And I think there needs to be a lot more analysis of the whole external capital issue in terms of long-term performance and what this means for group cohesion. And what it means also for risk, risk to group savings.
And much of the best practices encourages the linkage to begin with savings first, where it's a place to deposit excess liquidity. Yes, we know that can be an issue, but begin with savings. And I don't have time to go into great detail about this, but the financial exercise that I gave you online, I really encourage all of you to just take some time to do it. It won't take more, I would say, Andrew, Jeffrey, than say half an hour or so. It's really helpful to look at this because this shows you the financial implications of linkages as well. It has not only governance risk to the group, but it has a discernible financial impact on the returns to members. So the first one, so what I've asked you to do is calculate the return on equity and the return on assets. And again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but what's important to know is that when we look at the source of funds up top, the equity, which is their own money, can anyone tell me on that top line? So the balance sheet, another way to think of the balance sheet is source of funds and use of funds. So the source of funds, where they get their money, and the use of funds, what they do with their money. That's partly where the group or any of us have leverage, right, in terms of earning. So the source of funds, the equity is the members' own money. That's hot money. What's the hot money on that top line?
Savings.
What's the hot savings and
shares?
Now, in many groups, they don't make a distinction between savings and shares. I just for illustration purposes, because in some of the more formal member-owned models, they do. But so the equity there is 850, right? And if part of their source of funds, that 250, that's money coming from outside. That's cold money. So that's going to bring down their return on equity. If it were a group that was entirely shared and not linked, the return on equity is always going to be higher because the income that they're earning is against only hot money, not a mix of hot and cold. So equity is their members' own hot money. Assets, if we look at use of funds, that is their line of assets. So then we're looking at what is the return, what is the income that the group is making against all of their assets. And that includes the biggest asset is always their loans outstanding, their portfolio. Cash is also an asset. It's a liquid asset. So we do that calculation as well. And I'm gonna leave this. I just want you to get the logic. The logic is important. It's just helpful to understand bridging from that hot money, cold money conversation, that it has a financial impact on the group. It has both a governance risk and a financial impact on the group. And you'll see when you look at, if you don't do the exercise, you can look at the cheat sheet But I really encourage you just to practice yourself and see what the implications are. It's helpful. Not because we need to do return on assets and return on equity for the groups on a regular basis, but because it helps us understand the logic and the principles behind it. Any questions or clarification before we sign off? Any questions about, okay, or related to the field work, related to anything that we've talked about today?
This is your last webinar, so your last chance to say anything.
Except for the graduation webinar.
Right, then you can say whatever you want. But
oh, maybe just a quick distinction between, you see up here, this is a very, very basic financial performance lesson. So you see up top, source of funds and use of funds. That's a very basic balance sheet. And revenue and costs is a very basic income statement for the group. So this shows you, where are they getting their revenue? They're getting it from the interest that they charge themselves, as well as the fines for phones going off, for gossiping, for coming to meetings late, for late repayment. And so you're doing this exercise again, just to get a sense. What's most important in terms of the indicator that we're looking at is the returns to members. When they share out, what is the returns to members? And we know that returns to members is higher in a savings groups model than with most of the alternatives. But doing this exercise will actually help you to see the numbers, especially compared to linkages.
all right, so
Okay. Sorry, we're over time.
that's fine. I want to.
I had a question that's outside the slide.
Yeah, sure.
Expression. There's a lot of material that is in the website.
Yes.
Is it still accessible after the 31st of May?
I think so, but not for much longer. I don't know when the official end date is of the course. Let me check that out, but I'm pretty sure it will be available.
Is it 1 month after?
Yeah, I think it's like 1 month after.
We'll check that for you and get back to you.
Great.
But I would encourage you, do make sure that you've downloaded the documents that the other thing we can do is set up, hey Bill, I can do this, is set up a Dropbox where we have all the files, which is,
Yes.
the exercises. What we can't do, unfortunately, is save all the discussions, all the rich discussions that we've had. But in terms of the exercises, like these skill exercises that we've done, all of the assignment guidelines, all of the reading materials, including some of Hugh's work, all of that we can put into a Dropbox and make sure that you have access to that.
No,
Yes.
Nancy, I already have 3 of the modules in zip files.
Oh, fantastic.
So
Well,
what I'll
Bill's
do
way
is
ahead.
I'll put all the rest of it in zip files, and I'll put it up in Box, and then invite everybody to Box, and then you can all get what you want out of those. So we'll have the PowerPoints and everything else in there. So it even has, I think, some of the documents that we did collaboratively.
Great. Oh, great.
So,
That's fantastic. Even these recordings?
these recordings I can put in there as well. Yeah.
Great.
So
Fantastic.
just the other thing that people have to remember is these are very big files. These recordings are like 140 megabytes. So it'd be very hard for you to download them. And just understand that your bandwidth will be completely consumed by this for hours. So do it overnight. So that it starts copying overnight and then downloading overnight, and then by the morning it'll be there, and then you won't be using up your bandwidth and losing time and productivity. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I said in the beginning, I think some of you were not with us, is that I'll be sending out for all the MasterCard scholars a specific MasterCard evaluation that you need to fill out. And for everyone, you're going to have a post-course assessment that we want you to complete. And I'll send these out within the next week, and I'd like to get them back by no later than June 8th, which is a Friday. And then what I propose we would do is to have on Friday, June 15th, to have our graduation online virtual graduation party, which is fun. And everybody will be invited. I'll have your certificates and I'll virtually give them to you. And then if you provide me with your mailing address, I'll put them in the mail to you. And just to kind of emphasize the point, it's easier if you have some contact in Europe or the US that I can mail to. It's a little bit easier to get them to you. If someone's coming down to visit you or something like that. The success of mailing things directly to Africa is difficult, and like a DHL package is too expensive to send it that way. So we'll try to maximize the efficiency by sending them out if we have a contact in the US or Europe. But if not, I will definitely mail it to you, and we'll do our best to get them to you when we're ready. That's all that I have, Nancy.
That's all that I have. I just again encourage you, if you'd like to set up a coaching call, do let us know. And again, really encourage you to try this exercise. And all the best on your field work. Keep talking to us online with questions that we can keep talking about your field work as we go.
Thanks for everybody. This recording will also be posted up on the website soon.
Thank you, and thank you, Hugh.
Thanks, Hugh, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Asante.
Asante.
And,